What if I told you there's a WNBA franchise out there that's building a super team so stacked it looks like cheating and nobody can prove a thing? The New York Liberty just signed Satou Sabally. Add her to Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, and Jonquel Jones, and you've got a roster that makes the rest of the league look like practice squads. The salary cap is supposed to prevent exactly this. So how is New York pulling it off? Fans are screaming cap circumvention, brown paper bags, secret sponsorship deals, off-book cash. Is any of it true? Maybe, maybe not. But here's what is true. While New York is stacking all-stars, Indiana has Caitlin Clark on a rookie deal worth $500,000 and just signed a backup point guard. Same league, same rules. Completely different results. One franchise is treating its championship window like a countdown timer. The other is treating it like it has forever. And that difference, that's about to define the next era of the WNBA. Stay with me. The New York Liberty just signed Satou Sabally to a multi-year deal. On the surface, that sounds like one transaction, one player moving from one team
Don't forget to
to
subscribe
another.
and turn
But
on
when
the
you zoom out
notification bell
and look
so
at
you
what
never
this
miss a
roster
video.
actually is right now, Breanna Stewart, Sabrina Ionescu, Jonquel Jones, and now Satou Sabally, you start to realize this isn't just a signing. This is a statement, a power move that's sending a very specific message to every other franchise in the league. We operate differently, and we don't apologize for it. The salary cap exists in the WNBA for the same reason it exists in every professional league: balance, competition, the idea that no single team should be able to hoard talent while everyone else scrambles for scraps. The cap is supposed to be the great equalizer, and on paper, strictly on paper, it should make what New York is doing impossible. Breanna Stewart is one of the most dominant players in the history of this league. Sabrina Ionescu is must-watch basketball every single night. Jonquel Jones is a former MVP. And now you're adding Satou Sabally, a two-way forward who just played in the 2025 WNBA Finals, at the same time, on the same team, under the same salary cap that every other franchise in the league has to follow? The math doesn't add up. And fans across WNBA social media are starting to ask a very uncomfortable question out loud, one that front offices in Indiana, Chicago, Las Vegas, and everywhere else are probably whispering behind closed doors. How exactly is New York pulling this off? Let's talk about what people are actually saying, because this conversation has been heating up for a while, and it's getting louder by the day. The allegation, and it's important to be clear that this is an allegation, not a proven fact, is that the New York Liberty's ownership group, the Tsai family, is using their extraordinary wealth and business connections to compensate players through channels that don't show up on the official salary sheet, not in some crude, obvious way, but through a network of deals and arrangements that are technically difficult to trace or penalize. Here's what the speculation looks like when you lay it out. A player considers signing with New York for less money than she might command elsewhere. On paper, it's a team-friendly deal. But then, shortly after signing, an endorsement opportunity materializes. A sponsorship deal comes through with a company that happens to have a relationship with the Tsai family's business empire. Maybe there's a housing arrangement. Maybe there are appearance fees, speaking engagements, or consulting agreements that didn't exist before that player put pen to paper in New York. None of those things necessarily violate the salary cap, because none of them are technically basketball income. The cap governs what teams can pay players as basketball salary. It has far less control over what players earn in the broader business world, especially when those business opportunities emerge in the orbit of billionaire ownership with tentacles in media, tech, retail, and entertainment. Fans on social media have been calling for an investigation. The phrase "brown paper bag full of cash" has been thrown around as shorthand for the idea that New York's real recruiting pitch happens somewhere off the books, somewhere the league's compliance office isn't looking. Is that a fair characterization? Probably not literally, But the underlying concern that New York's players are receiving off-court compensation that effectively subsidizes their below-market contracts is a serious one that deserves an honest look. The WNBA's collective bargaining agreement has provisions addressing cap circumvention, but enforcement is murky. The line between a player landing an endorsement deal because she's talented and marketable and a player landing that same deal as part of an arrangement tied to her contract decision is genuinely hard to prove. The league would need to demonstrate intent and coordination, which is almost impossible without someone inside the operation talking. So the allegations float, the signings keep happening, and New York keeps building a roster that looks like it shouldn't exist. Here's the part of this conversation that sometimes gets lost in all the controversy. Even if every allegation about off-book compensation were completely false, New York would still have massive advantages that no salary cap rule can touch. The Liberty play in the largest media market in the United States, full stop. What that means practically is that every game, every player, every moment that happens in a New York Liberty uniform gets amplified in a way that playing in Indiana or Atlanta simply cannot match. Television exposure, social media reach, brand visibility, all of it scales dramatically when your home arena is in New York City. They're also the defending champions, and that matters more than people sometimes acknowledge. Satou Sabally played in the 2025 WNBA Finals with Phoenix. She knows what that run feels like. She knows how close she was, and she chose to leave and go somewhere with an even more established winning culture. That's not a decision you make purely because of money. That's a decision you make because you want a ring and you want to maximize your chances of getting one. The Kevin Durant comparison is actually pretty sharp here. Durant built a Hall of Fame career in Oklahoma City, won MVPs, made finals appearances. But when the window he had didn't produce the championship he wanted, he made a calculated, controversial decision and went to Golden State, the team best positioned to win. The basketball world lost its mind. Critics called him a ring chaser, but he got 2 titles and never looked back. Sabally just did something remarkably similar. Dallas wasn't delivering. Phoenix was close, but not quite there. New York is already built. New York already won. And New York is offering her a chance to be part of something that could define the next chapter of WNBA history. When you frame it that way, the decision makes complete sense, with or without any off-book arrangements. The question that should be making Indiana, Las Vegas, and Chicago uncomfortable isn't just, how is New York doing this? It's, why are players choosing New York when they could choose us? Because that answer reveals something deeper than salary cap math. Let's talk about Indiana, because this is where things get genuinely frustrating, not in a casual sports talk kind of way, but in a this could have real consequences kind of way. Caitlin Clark is on a rookie contract. Right now, this season, she is the biggest draw in women's basketball. She is the reason the Indiana Fever just had the most watched season in WNBA history. She is the reason corporate sponsors are paying attention, the reason casual fans are tuning in, the reason the franchise has the kind of cultural moment that most sports teams never experience. And she's earning roughly $500,000 this season. That is an extraordinary situation for a franchise to be in. A generational talent at the peak of her popularity, playing on a below-market deal, with multiple seasons remaining before she hits free agency. In theory, this is exactly the kind of scenario where a front office goes all in, where you look at your cap situation, get creative with every available tool, and build the most competitive roster you possibly can, because this window will not stay open forever. Now factor in Kelsey Mitchell. Mitchell just signed a Supermax extension, which, when you combine her number with Clark's, puts roughly $1.9 million tied up between 2 players. People have used that as an excuse for why Indiana can't make aggressive moves in free agency. But that argument doesn't hold up under scrutiny. The Liberty have Breanna Stewart making over $500,000. They have comparable cap constraints. And they just added a player who was in the finals last season. The numbers aren't the barrier. The approach is the barrier. The willingness to be creative, aggressive, and relentless is what separates franchises that build super teams from franchises that run it back and hope for the best. Indiana's window with Clark on a rookie deal is approximately 3 seasons. 3 seasons to build something special. 3 seasons to stack the right pieces around the most marketable player in women's basketball. 3 seasons to win the championship that would cement this era as one of the great runs in WNBA history. The clock is running. And right now, Indiana seems to be watching it instead of racing against it. There's a pattern emerging with Stephanie White's roster construction, and Fever fans have picked up on it in a way that's hard to dismiss. Year 1 as Indiana's head coach, White brought in Dewana Bonner, a veteran forward who played for White in Connecticut. Someone who knew her system, ran her sets, understood her philosophy. It didn't work. Bonner was past her prime, the fit was awkward, and the experiment burned up cap space and roster spots that could have gone elsewhere. Year 2, the solution apparently is more of the same. Temi Fagbenle-Harris is coming to Indiana, another player who ran White's offense in Connecticut. Another familiar face, another trusted name from a previous stop. Another bet that system familiarity will translate into on-court success. Here's the problem with that logic. Fever fans spent the entirety of last season publicly, loudly, and repeatedly complaining about Stephanie White's offensive system. The sets were slow. The reads were predictable. Opposing defenses had time to rotate and recover before Indiana could generate clean looks. Caitlin Clark, one of the best shooters in the history of basketball, was frequently running actions that didn't maximize her strengths. The offensive identity never gelled into something that felt genuinely threatening. So, if the criticism of the system is that it's too slow and too predictable, how does bringing in more players who are deeply familiar with that slow, predictable system solve the problem? If anything, it entrenches it. It makes it harder to adjust, harder to evolve, because now you have personnel who were specifically recruited to run those same sets. The argument for bringing in players who know White's system is that installation time gets cut down, that cohesion builds faster, that you're not asking veterans to learn new concepts on the fly. That's a legitimate coaching philosophy, but it only works if the system itself is good enough to win with. And right now, a significant portion of Indiana's fan base doesn't believe it is. What would actually fix the problem is either changing the system or adding a player talented enough to force the system to adapt around her. A player like Gabby Williams, for instance, who was the subject of considerable speculation in Indiana circles. A premier international talent who would have required the offense to expand and evolve. That would have been a genuine solution. Instead, the answer seems to be trust the process, trust the coach, trust that the players who already know the playbook will execute it better this time. It's the definition of doing the same thing and expecting different results. Let's be precise about what the Indiana Fever have actually added this offseason, because the details matter. Monique Billings, a veteran power forward with solid fundamentals, good energy, dependable rebounding, and the kind of defensive versatility that makes her a useful rotation piece. She is a professional. She will do her job. She is not a star, and nobody is claiming she is. She is depth. Temi Fagbenle-Harris, a big who played for White in Connecticut, brings physicality and experience and fills a backup role at center or power forward. Again, a professional. Again, not a star. Depth. Cece Harris, a backup point guard who previously played under Stephanie White, reuniting with a coach who knows her strengths. She can run the second unit, keep the offense functioning when Clark is on the bench, and provide serviceable minutes. Depth. These are not bad signings. Let's be honest about that. None of these players are embarrassing acquisitions. They are all legitimate WNBA contributors who will earn their roster spots and help the team in specific situations. But they are backup-level additions being treated, in some corners of the fan base, as if they represent a meaningful closing of the gap with New York and Las Vegas. They don't. And the player everyone keeps asking about, Aaliyah Boston, remains unsigned, unannounced, and conspicuously absent from any news surrounding Indiana's offseason. Boston's development is one of the most important storylines surrounding this franchise. Her growth as a scorer, her improvement as a creator, her ability to be a genuine second option alongside Clark, all of that matters enormously for what Indiana can become. But her status remains uncertain. Then there's the Gabby Williams question, now officially answered. Williams, the elite international forward who would have brought elite defense, versatile offense, and a skill set that perfectly complemented Clark's game, appears to be staying overseas. That was always the more likely outcome. The WNBA salary scale simply can't compete with what top European clubs offer international players of Williams' caliber. But it represented something important to Fever fans, the idea that Indiana would aggressively pursue a transformative talent instead of settling for safe options. That hope is gone. What remains is a roster that looks functionally similar to last year's roster, with some veteran depth added and some existing concerns unaddressed. This is the part that's hardest to understand, because the ingredients are all there. The Indiana Fever just finished the most-watched season in WNBA history. Caitlin Clark's rookie year generated television ratings that shocked the sports media industry. Games that would normally be afterthoughts pulled audiences that rivaled playoff broadcasts from major men's leagues. The Fever were everywhere: highlight packages, talk shows, ESPN segments, viral moments on social media every single week. Corporate sponsors were not just interested, they were eager. They were lining up. Now compare that to New York. The allegation, again, unverified, speculative, is that the Tsai family leverages their business relationships to create endorsement and sponsorship opportunities for players who sign team-friendly contracts. Whether that's happening or not, the underlying mechanism is real. Star players want to maximize their total earnings, not just their cap salary. If a team can help a player earn more through legitimate off-court channels, that team becomes more attractive as a destination, even at a lower contract number. Indiana has everything they need to do exactly that. The attention is there. The corporate interest is there. The media exposure is there. If a front office exec sat across from a free agent target and said, "Yes, our contract offer is competitive, but beyond that, you're going to be in front of millions of people every time you step on the floor. Sponsors are lining up around this organization, and we can connect you with opportunities that won't exist at any other franchise." That's a powerful pitch. That is a legitimate advantage the Fever could be using. The question is whether they are. And based on the players they've signed and the players they haven't signed, the answer appears to be not effectively enough. New York has ownership with a global business empire. Indiana has ownership with a major league franchise at the center of the biggest cultural moment in WNBA history. That's not nothing. That's actually a lot. The gap between what Indiana has and what Indiana is using might be the most frustrating gap in this entire conversation. Other front offices would kill to have Caitlin Clark as their recruiting pitch. Indiana has Caitlin Clark as their recruiting pitch. And the moves they've made this offseason don't reflect that advantage being fully leveraged. Take a step back and look at what the rest of the league did this offseason, because the contrast is jarring. The New York Liberty entered free agency as defending champions and immediately added Satou Sabally, a player who just appeared in the WNBA Finals, a two-way forward who can defend multiple positions, create her own shot, and elevate a roster that was already the best in the league. They didn't settle for depth. They didn't run it back and hope for internal development. They got better. Meaningfully, significantly better. The Chicago Sky made the kind of aggressive moves that signaled genuine championship ambition. They landed Skylar Diggins-Smith, one of the most experienced and battle-tested guards in the league. They made trades. They restructured. They looked at their young core around Angel Reese and said, "We're not waiting. We're building around her right now, and we're going to give her real weapons to work with. Chicago came into this offseason with problems and leaves it looking genuinely dangerous. The Las Vegas Aces didn't need to do much because they'd already done the work. Aja Wilson, Kelsey Plum, Jackie Young. That's a dynasty foundation. They retained their stars, added smart depth, and maintained the kind of roster continuity that breeds championship experience. They're still the team everyone else is chasing. And Indiana signed Monique Billings, Temi Fogbinlay-Harris, and Cece Harris. There's a concept in sports that separates contenders from pretenders' urgency. The understanding that windows close, that opportunities don't repeat themselves on demand, that the moment you have right now is not guaranteed to exist next year or the year after. The franchises that win consistently are the ones who treat every offseason like it might be their last real chance, because sometimes it is. The Liberty know this. That's why they're adding Sabally to a roster that already won the championship. They're not satisfied. They're not resting. They're actively trying to be more dominant than they already are, because they understand that if they give the rest of the league time to catch up, the rest of the league will eventually catch up. Indiana doesn't appear to be operating with that same urgency. And the charitable interpretation is that they have a plan that isn't fully public yet, that there are moves in the pipeline, that the Aaliyah Boston situation resolves soon, that there's a free agent target being pursued quietly that will change the calculus when it's announced. Maybe that's possible. But what's been announced is what's been announced. And what's been announced doesn't close the gap. There's a version of this conversation where Indiana fans push back and say, just wait, internal development will be enough. Caitlin Clark elevates everyone around her. Health and continuity will get us there. And it's worth taking that argument seriously, because it's not completely without merit. Clark does elevate players around her. She creates so much gravity on offense that shooters get open looks they wouldn't generate on other teams. Her passing is elite enough to make role players look better than they are. Last season proved that she can drag a flawed roster deep into the playoffs through sheer will and talent. If everyone around her takes a step forward, if Aaliyah Boston emerges as a genuine second option, if the health issues that plagued the roster last year resolve, then maybe this group is more competitive than the offseason moves suggest. But maybe and if and hope are not championship strategies. Hope doesn't beat Aja Wilson in a Game 5. Hope doesn't solve the spacing problems that made Indiana's half-court offense so painful to watch last season. Hope doesn't create the defensive identity the team needs when facing elite offensive systems. Hope doesn't answer the question of what happens when Clark sits down for 5 minutes and the offense essentially stops functioning. What answers those questions is talent. Specific talent, acquired with intention, targeted to fill specific needs. A wing who can create her own shot. A big who can defend the paint and score in the post. A secondary creator who takes pressure off Clark in crunch time. Those needs were obvious last season. They remain obvious now. And the players added this offseason don't address any of them in a meaningful way. The Dewana Bonner experiment should have been a lesson. You can't patch a roster with familiarity and hope. You can't paper over fundamental structural weaknesses with veteran presence and system knowledge. Bonner was a respected player brought in because she knew White's system. It didn't work. And the response to that failure appears to be, let's try it again, but with different players who also know White's system. At some point, the pattern has to be interrupted. Something has to change. Because Caitlin Clark will not be on a rookie deal forever. 3 seasons from now, when she hits free agency, the leverage Indiana has right now, the cap space created by her below-market deal, the corporate interest, the media attention, the once-in-a-generation platform, all of that shifts dramatically. The window isn't permanent. It never is. The Liberty understand this about their own situation. They know Breanna Stewart isn't going to be at this level indefinitely. They know Sabrina Ionescu's prime years are happening right now. So they're maximizing every single one of them. They're not waiting for next off-season. They're not hoping the roster gels on its own. They're adding Satou Sabally to a team that already won the championship, because that's what franchises with real championship ambition do. Here's where things stand, and it's worth saying it plainly. The New York Liberty are operating on a different level. Whether that's because of billionaire ownership, leveraging business connections in ways that bend the spirit of the salary cap, or because of market size, or winning culture, or some combination of all of it, the result is the same. They have a roster that shouldn't exist under the rules as written, and they built it anyway. That's what winning franchises do. They find the edges, they push them, and they don't apologize for it. Chicago is swinging, Vegas is locked in, and Indiana is running it back with depth pieces, hoping the combination of Clark's brilliance and internal development will be enough to compete with teams that are actively, aggressively, relentlessly trying to get better. The uncomfortable truth that Fever fans have to sit with is this: Caitlin Clark is a once-in-a-generation player. Generational players don't come along often, and when they do, franchises get one real window to build something extraordinary around them. That window is open right now. Not next year, not in 2 years. Right now, while she's locked into a below-market deal, while the attention is at its peak, while the corporate interest is at its highest point, while the rest of the league is still figuring out how to stop her. What Indiana does with this window will define this era of the franchise. And so far, the definition looks like caution when the moment is calling for boldness, familiarity when the situation is demanding transformation, and depth moves when what's needed is a genuine, undeniable, championship-caliber impact signing. The gap between Indiana and the teams at the top of the WNBA isn't insurmountable, but it's real. And while the Liberty are adding all-stars to championship rosters, and Chicago is rebuilding with aggression and purpose, the gap isn't standing still. It's getting wider, and the clock on Clark's rookie deal is getting shorter. Those two things happening at the same time is the story of Indiana's offseason, and it's a story that should make every Fever fan deeply, genuinely uncomfortable about what comes next. Stay locked with my channel, Simply Explained, for further WNBA updates.